name's Linda. We are a group of radical fat feminist women. We see our oppression as fat women as being inherent to sexism. We are an activist group who do public speaking, facilitate problem-solving groups for fat women, and generally try to publicly bring out suppressed medical information, as well as offer support to other fat women.
It's important for fat women to understand that you're going to have to go through some really heavy changes, and that things that were told to you, things that you grew up believing, are lies on a really deep level, on a really painful level. It's very easy to just dismiss what's being said. Oh, they're just people who couldn't diet successfully. We've all died successfully many times, and we've all gotten fatter. And we have statistics to back us up if that's important to you. What should be important to you is your experience. The fact that you've dieted many times and gained it back. The fact that you have to live for tomorrow, for the time you can get in your bathing suit. A lot of what we do in the Fat Underground is informational, because it's real important that we know that we're not crazy and that information has been suppressed. But one of the most important parts of the Fat Underground is sharing our pain with each other and sharing what's happened to us, the stories that nobody ever hears, because we're too embarrassed and because we think we're too crazy, we're the only ones, until we find out that there are millions of us out there. A lot of my pain has to do with doctors. When I was 14, we're on a camping trip and I got a pain in my side. And I kept that pain in my side for 2 days without telling anybody much about it. And finally, I had to go to bed. My mother made me go to bed, and I said, you know, Ma, it's nothing to worry about. Don't worry. I don't want to go to the doctor. And I refused to go to the doctor for like 2.5 days. And finally had to be taken to the hospital. My mother physically dragged me out of the house to go to the hospital, because it turned out that I had a ruptured appendix that had turned gangrenous because I'd waited so long. And the reason that I waited so long was because the last time I'd been to the doctor, he had put me on a diet, and I hadn't lost any weight. And I knew that what I had was serious. I could feel it in my body, but it felt a lot more serious to go to that doctor not having lost weight than to go in the hospital with a gangrenous appendix, because there wasn't a whole lot to live for anyway. Years later, I started having back problems. I had these terrible, terrible attacks of pain in my back. And so I went to a doctor who charged me $15 and didn't examine me, and sat there across from me and said, well, you know, as long as you're fat, you've got to expect things like that to happen. And I said to him, I'd like maybe a little more coherent explanation of what's happening to my body. And he said, well, you know, fat women, what happens to you? You're going to have to expect pain there, and you're going to have a lot more things coming. And I went through that with a couple of doctors. Of course, it turned out later that I had a congenital malformation in my back and my bone structure that I inherited from my mother. But then I spent like 2 years going from doctor to doctor and trying to lose weight, and it not helping when I lost weight, and thinking that I was crazy, and being real hurt when they wouldn't even want to examine me because they didn't want to look at my body. I once was raped and sat in this little cubicle with a curtain and listened to 2 male doctors outside who, of course, after 5 hours of waiting, 2 doctors came at once. They stood and argued over who was going to have to examine me because they didn't want to touch me, and talking about my stomach and how my genitals were probably fat and my vagina was probably fat, and making jokes about it. And I sat in there with dried blood all over me and listened to that.
We demand good health care.
I hate it when I go to doctors and they blame all my symptoms on my fat.
The Fat Underground has done quite a bit of medical research, looking at figures in the original papers, not just abstracts in journals. One study we found is of the world's literature on obesity. The researcher Stunkard found that of all the studies done, only 8 measure up to his standards.
And his standards were by no means stringent.
This shows that obviously there is a lot of misinformation in the medical field concerning obesity.
While the evidence is still far from complete, enough information has accumulated recently to motivate a fresh look at what has been passing for common knowledge for the better part of 3 decades.
What you mean is that doctors probably don't know much when it comes to us, and they think they do.
A big mistake that is made is not differentiating between factors that are correlative and those that are causative. Researchers imply that being fat is a cause of certain things, but that's not what their studies show.
Take high blood pressure, for example. Their studies show simply that there is a correlation between obesity and high blood pressure. But they leave out that there is also a correlation between being black and having high blood pressure. Probably between being any oppressed minority in this country and having high blood pressure. The real causative factor is stress.
Just look at the Rosetta studies. There is a community of Italian Americans who live in a rural and isolated community in western Pennsylvania. It is common there for people to weigh 300 to 350 pounds. They are encouraged to eat as they like. People in this community live the normal lifespan and longer, with no unusually high incidence of coronary disease or other obesity-related diseases.
Put these people in the mainstream American culture, and they will drop off like flies.
My name is Gudrun. I just want to mention that we're talking about women who are fat like ourselves, that your average thin woman who is dieting her 5 pounds is doing some damage to her body and doing an unnecessary injustice to herself and her lifestyle. But when we talk about diet, we're talking about
people, women like ourselves who are forced to diet our entire lives because we're naturally fat women, and who are talking about 100-pound weight loss that is killing us, not just, the 5 pounds that we could all play around with, or even the 20 pounds where you think, you eat an ice cream and you think, well, I gained a pound and so I won't eat the ice cream. That's like kid stuff compared to the kind of diet rituals that any of us have been through that are really the causes of the early deaths in fat people.
The most important piece of medical information for me was a study that's been very widely duplicated. And that's a study on a long-term study on how many people lose weight and gain it back. 99% of the people who lose weight gain it back. 90% of those people gain back more than they lost. That's really not what I thought it was like when I was growing up. I thought that everybody but me lost weight and kept it off. And that's not true. 99% gain it back. 90% gain back more than they lost. So if you go through a lifetime losing weight and gaining back more than you lost, then losing weight and gaining back more than you lost again, you have what's called a yo-yo syndrome. And that places tremendous pressure in the body in terms of cholesterol buildup. Cholesterol buildup became so high in one study that they did, they had to discontinue the study because of the gaining and losing weight effect. This is really known to be very, very dangerous. And this is the cause of a lot of problems that are attributed to fat, which are in fact more attributable to dieting than to being fat. It's important to remember that the body needs to maintain a stasis. The body wants to remain at a certain level. And when you disrupt your body chemistry by gaining and losing weight, creates tremendous pressures on every organ of your body, particularly on things like the heart, which is a muscle. And one of the things you lose every time you lose weight is muscle tissue, so that your heart will be deteriorating after a while. For example, what probably happened to Cass Elliot, which is that she lost weight so often and gained it back so often that the muscle in her heart deteriorated, and the fat that every person has in normal amounts around their heart closed in to take over the place because the body abhors a vacuum, so that the muscle deteriorated and the heart became covered with the fat that's around it. That is a natural protective layer. And that's how she died, and I think that's how a lot of people die.
When I was a young girl, used to seek pleasure. When I was a young girl, used to drink ale out of the alehouse and down to a jailhouse, right out of a barroom, down to my grave.
I'm Aldebaran, and I used to think I was real crazy because I would see that I didn't eat very much, and that in fact the things that were called fattening, like pastries and fried potatoes and all that, I didn't eat hardly at all, and yet I was always fat. And so obviously I was just wrong about my perception of things. And I guess that gets down to one of the paradoxes that we have in the Fat Underground, where in order to get our point across and make people believe us when we say that the medical profession is lying when they paint us all as gluttons, we have to quote medical research that we've looked up in medical journals. And it would feel much better to me if I could just say, you know, I eat totally normally, I eat no more than the average slim person, and you would believe me. But since you probably wouldn't, I think that that's why I would have to say that, first of all, for me, one of the first actions that I did as I started to become aware of being oppressed as being a fat woman and starting to get indignant about it was I began to read in medical and nutritional journals, and what I found was that across the board, the nutritionists find that the average fat person doesn't eat any more than the average slim person. And that what goes on is that we're being punished on the supposition that we do. And there's a whole bunch of legal discriminations based on our eating so much more, like you can't get a job, etc. And I think that that really has to change because it makes us crazy. It invalidates the way we see the world. And it means that, in effect, we end up having to spend our lives starving and thinking that that's normal.
Today's markets are filled with foods that are not foods. Produce and processed foods are loaded with antibiotics, preservatives, dyes, and flavorings. These mask the basic lack of flavor resulting from inferior nutritional value.
A whole category of foods are sold whose express purpose is not to nourish. These are synthetic low-calorie food and food substitutes. They are sold on the promise that one can eat all one wants of them and not look as if one is eating all one wants.
The Fat Underground opposes this phony asceticism. We call for an attitude towards food and eating that is honest, indulgent, and compassionate. Arguments that people ought to be deprived of food without their totally free consent for any reason, medical, economic, or moral, offends human dignity.
On the medical count, it should be obvious that prolonged starvation is not a route to health.
Nor may the ideal of health interfere with a person's basic right to control her own or his own body.
Basic justice requires that all people have enough to eat. Basic dignity demands that people be allowed to decide for themselves what is enough. Social systems that withhold food from people are oppressive. Fat people often starve because it is the only way to gain social approval.
There are probably a lot of fat women watching this tape. Probably one of the reasons that you've come is to get information about the Fat Underground. It's very difficult to accept what the Fat Underground has to say. There are two reasons for that I found. The first is that, in a way, it negates your whole life. Because if you're fat, you have spent your whole life dieting. And if the information that we give you is true, you didn't need to. The second reason is that, more importantly, it takes away the hope that you have for the future. Because every fat woman wants to live a normal life. You don't want to be harassed on the street. You don't want to have to shop in Lane Bryant. You want to look like people in magazine ads. And although the first 92 years of your life you haven't been able to, there's always hope that you're going to. Well, it's an illusion. And I know it's an illusion. And you know it's an illusion. Deep down inside you, you know. And recognizing that is an important step in growing, and an important step in accepting yourself as a person. Because no fat woman can live for today. A fat woman in this country always lives for tomorrow. If you live for tomorrow, you're going to miss a hell of a lot. What we have to offer you is a real different way of life. A way of life that's immediate, that's now, a life in which you can like yourself, feel good about yourself, feel pretty, feel sexy, feel fine, without waiting for tomorrow, without being hungry, without having a headache, without feeling incomplete. So important that I'd like you to really listen to what we have to say on a really deep level. And maybe not accept it right away. Maybe just think about it. But try and be aware of the parts of your mind that are closed to us and why they're closed. And the fact that we've all been there and we all know that it's real sad the day you have to give up your hope.
I want to talk a little bit about the aesthetics and how that plays a part in our oppression. Like, even if there was no medical information, we would still need a political movement. And that movement would just be very much linked up with the women's movement. It would just be the Luxist movement. You know, the reason we're more than a Luxist movement is because we are aware of a diet industry that goes beyond, you know, pancake makeup on your face and mascara. It goes into, like, things that make us seriously ill. The diet industry is between like $16 and $21 billion a year. $1 billion, and there is no way that our society and our culture, which is an industrialist, capitalist culture, is going to allow that industry to be destroyed, and is going to allow medical information to get out that will destroy that industry. The economy couldn't withstand it. So we stress that we're a very serious political organization that is fighting, you know, a very serious enemy that doesn't want us to win, that cannot afford for us to win.
We single out as our special enemy the so-called reducing industries. These include reducing salons, diet clubs, diet doctors, diet books, diet foods, and appetite suppressants. We demand that they take responsibility for their false claims, acknowledge that their products are harmful to the public health, and publish long-term studies proving any statistical efficacy of their product. We make this demand knowing that over 99% of all weight loss programs, when evaluated over a 5-year period, fail utterly.
Why are their advertisements pitched almost entirely to women?
It's really important to a woman to be able to feel that she's superior to someone. I mean, she's the bottom of the heap in so many respects. So particularly if you have doubts about your beauty, if there's one thing you can do, and that is to hang on to that figure. And you have to put some effort into it because you're naturally maybe 10 pounds heavier. If you have to put effort into it, you want it to seem like it's worthwhile. And that means that you want to feel that a woman who is fatter than you is inferior to you. And so there's a tremendous payoff for people to maintain their bigoted attitudes toward fat people.
What I want very much from feminists, from women who are watching this tape, is to listen to what I have to say,
to understand what my life has been like, to understand that my life is typical of the lives of the fat women that you see on the street every day. That you see on the street, they're not dressed right, they're dressed in old, schlumpy clothes, and they look so out of date. Those are the only clothes you can get. And I want you to get the information from the Fat Underground, to understand what I feel, why I feel it, the rage that is in me, and the part that you play in causing that rage, that you continue to play in causing my anger. And I want you to give respect to us for who we are, for the fact that we've survived in a hostile country, in a hostile territory, and that we're just like you.
Right out of a barroom, down to my grave. Had he but told me before he shamed me, had he but told me about it in time, I could have had potions and salts of white mercury. But now I'm a young girl, cut down in my pride. Get 6 young gamblers to carry my coffin. Get me 6 young riders to sing me a song. Put bunches of roses all over my coffin. Roses to muffle the clouds as they fall. When I was a young girl, I used to seek pleasure. When I was a young girl, used to drink ale out of the alehouse and down to a jailhouse. My body is ruined. They've left me to die.
don't want to be separate from you anymore. Too long I've had to be separate. Too long I felt out of place. I've worked for you, I've worked for your causes, I've worked until I'm tired, bone tired, and I get nothing back from you. Nothing. I want it to change. I want you to get a hold of yourself from the inside out and change. And I want you, when you see a fat woman on the street, I want you to think of me. And I want you to know that that woman may be smiling, but underneath it she has not much to smile about. And I want you to give her the same respect you give me. I demand respect, and I demand it for all my sisters. I demand it when you see a fat woman on the beach, and you can't bear to look at her thighs. I demand that you turn around and you look at her thighs, and they're the same as yours. I demand that when you see a fat woman in a bus, and you start thinking about how much room she's taking up and how hard it's going to be to get by her, that you know damn well that that woman probably hasn't gone out in a week because she's scared to get on a bus, because she's scared of people like you.
And we're tired of being scared, and we're not going to be scared anymore.
And we're going to
start fighting back.
But we don't want to fight.
But we don't want to fight you, because you are our sisters.
Be
sisters to us.
And
if you see a fat woman on the street,
remember that that woman could be you, and that it's only luck that separates us.
And to fat women, please try and remember that on a really deep level, you know what's going on. And you know it's not because you're weak-willed. It's not because you have no discipline. It's not because you're oral. And it's not because you're neurotic or afraid of sex or you hate men. It's because it's your body's nature to be fat, and that's the reason. You know you'll have no life at all until you accept yourself as the woman you are.